Hi, my name is Elise and I am a full-time dessert blogger. How crazy is that? Dream job, am I right? Basically, I run a website, sweetsbyelise.com. Check it out. I'm also at sweetsbyelise blog on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and here on YouTube. But I provide freelance food photography, recipe development, and reel creation for food brands to use on their social medias without my name attached. Anyways, all that to say, I like to think on a good day, I know a thing or two about the kitchen and maybe, just maybe, I might be able to help you out. I get asked all the time, what do I do with all the sweets? I absolutely eat some of them, that's for sure. I give some away, but I utilize the freezer. And so today I wanted to talk a little bit about the treats that I freeze and how I freeze specific treats so that they come out of the freezer just as lovely as how they went in. I'm gonna be referring to three main tools in this video. The first is an airtight container. That is basically just Tupperware. These are my disgusting ones that I've used all throughout college. Woof. But they will work. Anything that has a top that will keep the air locked in. I have some not super gross ones linked in my Amazon storefront, and you can check that out in the description. Cling wrap. This is from Costco. I swear by the Costco cling wrap. If you haven't gotten involved yet, please do yourself a favor. Your life will change. Promise. But basically, I will sometimes wrap treats individually in cling wrap. That's what I mean. Here she is. And then when I say a zippable bag or a freezer bag, I'm referring to these plastic bags. Easy peas, right? Let's knock a few general ideas out of the way before we go into the details. First rule, never put anything warm in the freezer. I'm begging you. You want to let treats reach room temperature before you even attempt to put them in the freezer because it will totally alter the texture, potentially the consistency. And if we want our treats to be as close to normal as they can be, let's put them in at their normal temperature. Speaking of close to normal as possible, let's just put a giant disclaimer out there that if you put something in the freezer, it may not taste exactly as it would have straight out of the oven. That's just the truth of the matter, but we can get pretty close. So I'm thinking we should walk treat by treat, and that way we can get a general idea of what each treat requires or some of the hacks and tips and tricks I do for each treat. Let's start with cookies. I like to freeze cookies individually without cling wrap in a freezer bag. Let's talk about a couple different types of cookies. So first of all, these chocolate chip cookies, my bakery style chocolate chip cookies, check them out on the blog. They will change your life. I always have them on hand. They are always in the freezer. That's all. But these chocolate chip cookies have something in the topping, aka lots of chocolate chips. You want to let anything like that, like I said, fully set at room temperature. Do not put these warm in the freezer. And especially with these chocolate chips on top, these are gonna be really, really gooey and melty. Lovely. But not to put in the freezer and stack because you're just gonna mess it up and it's gonna be one big gooey chocolate mess inside of the freezer bag, right? So this trick works for cookies that have toppings on the cookie or a frosting, for example. What I like to do once they have come to room temperature is I like to put them on a sheet pan or a plate, whatever you've got, whatever your freezer has room for, and I stick them in the freezer for 10 minutes to firm up. So that firms up the chocolate chips, firms up the frosting on a cookie. I don't think glazes work very well in the freezer. I will say that. Glaze on a cookie sometimes gets watery and has a hard time coming back to what it's supposed to be. I would leave a glaze off. Back to the point. Stick them in the freezer for 10 minutes on the sheet, take them out, then pop them in the freezer bag. I think that that's just an extra layer of protection. You don't necessarily have to if you just let these come to full room temperature and they are like this, firm to the touch, specifically with cookies that have toppings like this. With the frosting, I do recommend doing that 10 minutes in the freezer until the top is firm. You want to be able to stick your finger in the frosting and not have it spread at all, because then when you stack the cookies, they won't mess up the frosting, right? Does that make any sense? Are we following? How are we doing? Let's move on to one of my other besties, brownies. I think that brownies are one of the easiest treats to freeze. Truly. Don't be afraid. Again, let the brownies fully come to room temperature. You do not want them warm. You want them to be firm enough to wrap. I like to wrap them in cling wrap. I wrap each individual brownie. I know it could be a little less time consuming, but I swear it keeps them really fresh and then they're really easy to serve. It would be really difficult to take out a full brownie sheet pan and then try and cut a piece off of it if you just wanted a little nibble or something, because the brownie is frozen solid. Very hard to do that. So if you're in the brownie mood, you can just grab one already wrapped brownie ready for you. So just as a visual, here's a good size. Stick the brownie. Bada bing, bada boom. Then from here, I'd put it either in a freezer bag or stacked in one of these airtight containers. Easy peas, right? Simple enough. I really did have brownies to freeze. Literally just throwing them in here. Popping them in the freezer. Glorious. All right, now on to cakes and cupcakes because they are sort of in the same realm. Again, wait until they're fully cooled. You can freeze cake and cupcakes without frosting a lot easier than you can with frosting, specifically when that comes to cupcakes, but you can freeze them either way. If you were to freeze cake layers, wrap them fully cooled in cling wrap, just like a layer or two, and pop them in the freezer. Easy peas. Wrapping a sheet cake is a little bit tougher, but I've done it before. Once you take the cake out of the pan, wrap the entire 13 by 9 or whatever size sheet cake you have in cling wrap and pop that in the freezer. Same deal. With cupcakes, I find that because they're a little bit moister, at least my cupcakes are pretty moist, I like to put them, similar to what we did with the cookies, on a plate or sheet for about 10 minutes in the freezer just to kind of firm them up. And then I will either wrap them individually in cling wrap unfrosted. This is all for unfrosted cupcakes. Wrap them in cling wrap or place them with a sheet of parchment paper stacked in an airtight container. You only want to do one layer if you were to do a freezer bag, just because the bottom of the cupcake and top of the cupcake might kind of glue together and then it rips the top off and it's not as pretty. For frosted cakes and cupcakes, let's spice it up. For a frosted layer cake, you're going to want to put the entire cake in the freezer for about 30 minutes to an hour. You really want to make sure that it's hard, especially if it has lots of decorations on the top, lots of piping, that sort of thing. And then you wrap the entire cake in cling wrap. You want to do 2 or 3 layers. Make sure you're going fully around the entire cake, and then you can thaw it at room temperature or in the fridge. For a sheet cake, I just find sheet cakes, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely hard to store an entire layer cake, but for sheet cakes, I just feel like I would stack on top of it and break it. So I don't really freeze frosted sheet cakes that I care about. If I have a leftover sheet cake though, I will put slices, same thing as before, slices on a plate or baking sheet, pop them in the freezer for 10-15 minutes to firm up, and then I will either place them one layer in a freezer bag, in layers with parchment paper between the layers in our airtight container, or individually in cling wrap and just throw them in a bag. Now, frosted cupcakes, you have to put them in the freezer on a baking sheet or a plate for 15-20 minutes. Really make sure that that frosting is set, because otherwise it will literally just demolish as you try and store it. So once the icing is set, you can do single layer in a large airtight container. You can cling wrap each cupcake and do a freezer bag. I think those are the 2 options I would choose from. I have done cupcakes without cling wrap in a freezer bag, and I haven't had the greatest success, so I wouldn't recommend that. You can if you don't really care about how the cupcakes look. But I found, especially I had sprinkles on the cupcakes that I froze without cling wrap, and the sprinkles kind of got watery on top of each other. Okay, at this point we've covered cookies, brownies, cakes and cupcakes. What am I missing? Muffins and breads. Muffins, wait until they're fully cooled, especially if there's decorations or toppings in the top, just like we did with the cookies. Often I put extra chocolate chips on top of my muffins if it's a chocolate chip muffin, or extra blueberries or whatever it is. Want to make sure that those are fully set and not ooey gooey in any way. And then those, I do not individually cling wrap. I just pop them in a freezer bag. I really recommend a freezer bag over an airtight container, just because I think the containers take up more space. Usually they're bulkier and harder to store. If you were to use an airtight container, I would do parchment paper in between the layers. Just because, again, if the bottom of the muffin and the top of the muffin kind of congeal together, can get a little messy. I think breads, these are like dessert breads, banana bread, that kind of thing, are really easy to freeze. Once they have fully cooled, you can easily wrap the entire loaf and just pop it in the freezer. If you were to want individual slices, you can do it that way too, because again, it's going to be hard to slice that loaf if it's super frozen, if you only wanted a nibble. So you can also freeze in slices or however big, bites, nibbles, whatever you want, in cling wrap, and then pop them in tried and true freezer bag. You can also do airtight container, but I just feel like I always end up going with freezer bag because it's just easier to me. I don't know. Follow your heart. I'm thinking that that's where we're going to stop for today. If you have a specific treat in mind that you would like to know how to freeze, please drop it in the comments, or you can message me on any of my social medias. Again, I'm at Sweets by Elise blog on Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest, TikTok. at Sweets by Elise blog. Or you can leave a comment below a specific recipe if it doesn't have freezing instructions on my website, which is sweetsbyelise.com. Again, I think freezing treats is such a great way to make sure that you don't waste anything, and usually they taste pretty similar to what they tasted like before you popped them in the freezer. So it's a win for everybody. Please subscribe and follow along for more baking content. I've got lots of tips and tricks coming your way, some recipe walkthroughs and other fun baking related content. I would love to have you here. And as always, happy baking.